Welcome in, everybody, to another MLS Monday by Scarves and Spikes. It's Tyler Pilgrim here alongside Sydney Hunt, and we will be joined shortly by the Godfather himself, Jason Longshore. But we had a lot to talk about. Sydney, how you doing?
Doing well. My blood pressure is getting back to normal really well. Playoff weekend, as we talked about before the show, a lot going on. Yeah. Of course, the Red Bulls sweeping the Crews, the big one. Seattle sweeping Houston. We'll talk about that. Of course, like you said, Jason Longshore is coming on. So we'll talk about all the matches over the weekend, touch on Atlanta United, of course, forcing Game 3 against Inter Miami. But, yeah, got some business to take care of.
Yeah, y'all, as usual, go check out scarvesandspikes.com. Obviously, this is not our normal Atlanta show. Had an article go out today about the Brooks Lennon news. So if you haven't heard about that yet, go to the website, scarvesandspikes.com. Go join the Patreon, patreon.com/scarvesandspikes. Get you into hang out with us in Discord, get you some other benefits, discounts, other good stuff. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff as far as written articles, I think, over on Patreon during the off season as well. So just a variety of content, and then go visit the shop. Get you a hoodie for this nice cold weather, as fabulously displayed here by Sydney. Go get you a coffee mug.
Coffee
look at that. And the hat. Get your coffee mug, which goes great with pumpkin spice coffee.
Is that what you're drinking?
That is what I'm drinking right now. I'm doing it. I'm totally like going into the whole fall vibe.
Not fall is here.
Hey,
fall
it's here. Tomorrow's gonna be like 80 degrees, but then it'll get colder again. Yeah. So, and then we'll of course have our Wednesday show, normal show. We'll be covering everything Atlanta, really diving into all the nitty gritty stuff with what happened to the Bens this past weekend, forcing Game 3, all the news, everything else, and then of course this coming weekend, keep an eye out. We have some stuff planned for the actual game itself. So just keep an eye on social media. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe. As our good friends over at the Battered Herons say, it is free 99. All you got to do is click a button, go do it. It makes us happy. It helps us a lot. So
yeah, we appreciate all of you. We're up to over 1,100 subscribers. Well, over 1,100 subscribers. Next up, 1,200. I think at last check, we're at a little over 1120, Tyler, at last check, 1123 or something like that. But it takes a few seconds. Just hit subscribe, like our content, share our content. We do our 3 takeaways after every Atlanta United match. That's something new that we started a few weeks ago. We'll look to carry that on next season. Of course, off-season content coming up, here on YouTube. And if you're watching on X, we appreciate you watching on X. Be sure to comment on X as well. A little bit difficult than it is on YouTube to comment, but definitely do that. We'll try to, get you involved as much as we can here on the show. But thanks for joining us. And as Tyler said, a lot to talk about as Jason Longshore comes on here in just a matter of seconds, I think.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna save the entire MLS conversation in Atlanta for when Jason gets on. But I think one of those things that I just wanted to touch on, because I don't feel like it can be touched on enough. I just got to give a quick shout out to the fans at the Atlanta game. Like, the vibe in that place, we touched on it on a 3 takeaways video after the game, but that place was something special that night. It was phenomenal. I mean, I know a lot of people have said it felt like 2018 again. We've said that a couple of times over the past couple of years, I feel like, but man, it wasn't just the last goal either. It was the equalizer, right? It was the Derek Williams, Pedro Amador connection at equalizer. Like, that set everybody back on their feet.
Yeah.
But then when Shande banged in that goal for the winner, dude, that place erupted. And Matt saying easily the loudest it's been since 2018. So I gotta give a quick shout out to the fans. We'll talk about it more. Patrick saying I still don't have a voice. I hear you. If I could have been screaming in the press box, I would have been screaming. 100%.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. I was watching on TV, but heard the crowd, heard how it came through, and just the Benz was just in full voice. And we mentioned it the other night, Atlanta. The crowd just really power of that team. And I think without that factor, I don't know if Atlanta United really pulls off the victory, on Saturday against Inter Miami. And yeah, we'll talk about the rest of MLS as well, the rest of the playoff picture. But, with us being a Atlanta United channel, I think that goes without saying that, you have to tip your hat to the crowd. Just a terrific performance by them. And kind of wish I was there. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't able to make it this time around. But shout out to them. Shout out to 68,000 or 65,000 plus make it out to the Benz that night.
68.5.
68,500 make it out to the Benz. A lot of them, I'm sure, Atlanta United fans, some of them maybe there for Messi and the crew, but not the crew, Inter Miami. But you know what I mean. But shout out to them and credit to them. And last match of 2024 in that building, and Atlanta United and the crowd delivered. So one more match, and we'll talk about that later on when we do our full roundup. But one more match against Miami. You win that one, you go to the semifinals, and we'll see what happens.
This coming weekend is going to be must watch for MLS in general. Battered Herons, we mentioned y'all a minute ago. Good friends, very good friends of the show. Saying hats off to you guys. I knew your fan base was going to show up and show out, and they did. Now it sets up probably one of the most exciting matches, I just think, in general of MLS in a long time. I mean, this one's going to be something special. Regardless of the result, this is going to be fun. So
the world will be watching, mainly from Messi, of course, but the world will be watching. A lot of eyes will be on this match, and I mentioned it the other day. We all mentioned it the other day. A lot of eyes will be watching Atlanta United versus Inter Miami on Saturday. 8 p.m. kickoff from Chase Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I do know one person that will be there, Tyler.
I do too. Sure. Not me this time. I don't get a lucky vacation.
I can't either, unfortunately.
Coming in hot. I wanted to give him a minute to kind of settle in a little bit, take a breath. He's over there shrugging. No, needs no introduction.
Jason Longshore.
Jason Longshore. What's up, buddy?
Not much. I will be there in Fort Lauderdale on a Saturday.
You and Mike.
And quite a few of the Soccer Down Here crew, actually. We're going to be pretty well represented. John Nelson making the trip, Madison Cruz making the trip, and we will have pictures from the talented Sophia Cupertino making the trip.
That's awesome.
So, we will be in full force.
Whole gang's together.
Crew rolling deep to South Florida.
We try.
So, I guess, I want to dive into the Atlanta game, but I want to kind of build up to it. I want to give it a minute because that's going to be the one that we're going to have the most insight. You're going to have the most insight. So I guess just to dive into it, before we do a specific game, was there any, and I think I know your answer, was there any specific game that you're just like, what in the world happened in this game, in this series?
Red Bulls. I mean, they weren't playing great coming in. Columbus has fallen off a little bit. I think, look, it's what we always do in all this stuff, right? We overreact and we fly off the handle about things. Now I see people trying to rewrite Columbus's standing in terms of quality.
Oh, that was quick too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was really fast. Look, this Columbus team, I've said over an 18-month period, and I'll stick to that. I think they are one of the best teams in MLS history over that 18-month period where they win MLS Cup. They get to a final of CONCACAF. Just outstanding. What we've seen from them, the quality of what we've seen from them. You can't always make quality equal results. And that's the hard thing about it. And when you have a very talented team that doesn't meet the same level of results, they're not going to be remembered in the exact same way. Doesn't mean they were crap. And I think that's something that we really have to get better at doing when we talk about, especially the sport where, like, to me, and look, I might consume the game differently than you guys. I might consume the game differently than others. Like, I do want quality and results. I love results. They're great. I'd like some quality to go along with it. That makes it the best. I do appreciate great quality even when the results aren't there. So, like, this Columbus team that has done everything they've done over this period of time in terms of results and quality, you can't erase that. You can ask if it can be continued. I think that's fair to ask at this point. Is Wilfred Nancy going to draw interest? Is Camacho potentially done or close to being done? If he is, can you get a center back who can do all the things that he's done? One of the most underrated players in this league over the past couple of years. He made that team jump. Everybody went nuts about them adding Gressel last summer. It was Camacho that made them, give them the ability to play the way that they did, in the wide open way that they did. If you don't have Camacho, you can't play Amundsen and Moreira as center backs. You just can't. It was Camacho who made them, and in a way, Camacho falling off a little bit here towards the end of the season, it's what's ended up knocking them out. It's his penalty that ends up knocking them out with that lunging challenge. They're one of the best teams of all time, and they have an MLS Cup to show for it. I did not see Red Bulls doing what they did, though, because they had not been good. They did get Forsberg back, and they've been great with Forsberg all year long. But I didn't see that coming against Columbus at all.
So I guess kind of pivoting to Red Bulls and terrific feat to knock out the Crew, who were the heavy favorite in that series, of course. Kind of looking ahead, you have a possible Hudson River Derby in the Eastern Conference semifinals if NYCFC do their job, or you have Cincy, who kind of struggled toward the end of the regular season, but have sort of picked things up here in the postseason. How do the Red Bulls match up to both teams, do you think?
They'll be on the road either way. I think it's a toss-up with NYC for Red Bulls if that's who they get. I think their style of play isn't going to be damaged by playing on a small pitch, so they can do what they do and be effective with it. I think their style of play isn't quite as effective against Cincinnati, who plays a kind of similar style. So I think from a neutral viewer standpoint, you'd be better off seeing NYC and Red Bulls. You're going to get more of the Hudson River Derby aspect of it, but you're going to get a little bit more of a clash of styles, which I think makes a better game. I've seen the Red Bulls in Cincinnati in a playoff game before, and it was not 2 hours of my life that I'd like to repeat. Look, it's two teams who don't want the ball, and when neither one really wants the ball, like, what do you get? You get a lot of back and forth. You're going to get a lot of transitions. You're going to get a lot of arguments around the way. Miazga's not involved, so you won't get as many. But it won't be. It'll be dramatic. It won't be as good in terms of quality. And it goes back to, again, what we want. Like, I do want some quality to go along with my drama. And I would rather see New York City try to figure out playing against the Red Bulls and how to do it and getting guys on the ball and the right pockets of space to get them in than Red Bulls and Cincinnati at times just having a transition battle. I do think Cincinnati beats NYC, and I think Cincinnati beats Red Bull in that game, if that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think with Red Bulls specifically, because I want to touch back on the Crew as well, but to kind of, I guess, roll it up into one, we always talk about parity in this league, right? And I think this series, if you want to call it that, I mean, this series kind of encapsulates like what makes MLS such a parity-based league, right? I mean, you have this Columbus team that has done phenomenal. And I heard folks on national broadcast this morning saying, well, they're just not that good of a team then if they couldn't do it again this year. And I think that's
garbage.
Sorry,
that's garbage.
Garbage. But the opposite of that is, right, like you have a Red Bulls team that just, they came out and they wanted it. They wanted it really, really bad. And even though they're playing ugly football and it is what it is, it was effective. And they went up against a team that played significantly more matches this year.
Mm-hmm.
So from the Red Bulls mentality perspective, how far do you think that could take them in this postseason?
I think with Red Bull, the thing is, like, they're always going to have a lower ceiling because you can, in a knockout game, fight fire with fire, like we talked about with Cincinnati. Cincinnati will just say, oh, you guys want to play off of the ball. You want to press us and create turnovers. Well, hey, guess what? We're not going to have the ball. Take it. Do something. And that's always been what has tripped up Red Bull in this incarnation since they went to this style of play. It's what teams have done to them eventually when that time comes. I mean, go back to 2018 with Atlanta United. I'll always remember Tata Martino going into Red Bull Arena in the regular season and saying, no, this is a statement about how we play. We're going to play our game and we're not going to deviate. And they lost, and they didn't play great in that game. Red Bull broke what Atlanta wanted to do. Postseason was a completely different mentality, and it wasn't totally like what Cincinnati would do or like what a Philadelphia has done with Red Bull, where it's, we're literally just going to play long every time. But it was much more measured and much more deliberate of, you're not going to press us in parts of the field that can hurt us. And we saw it happen in that series. So I think Red Bull are going to have to show, and signing Emil Forsberg and some of the other signings they've made are a step in that direction. Like, Forsberg is what they had wished Kaku could have been, a guy who can play in those moments, but can play their style of play. And we've seen the effect this season. When Forsberg has been in that team, they're among the top teams in the East. When he's not, they're nowhere near it. And they were nowhere near it for a lot of this season because he wasn't in their team for a lot of the season. But I don't know if I said it to you guys. I said it to a lot of people early on. With Forsberg, I said Red Bulls can be a problem.
Yeah.
Because in those moments where they do have to have the ball, he can actually do something with it.
Yep.
But he can also press and do everything that the team needs to do in their overall style of play. So they're better than they've been. They're better than they've been this season with Forsberg healthy. I didn't think they were at Columbus's level. Columbus did not play to their top tier, but they handled it. Red Bull, Miami would be fascinating if that was a matchup. That would be fascinating. Red Bull, Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati can do what Red Bull does and do it better, and also be better with the ball in the moments they need to be. So I think basically Cincinnati's a better version of Red Bull. NYC Red Bull would be fascinating if that's what it comes down to, because I could see Red Bull winning that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then
Plus
you get them in a knockout game. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely going to be an aspect, but you get into a knockout game after that. And, like if we're talking Orlando, Charlotte, Atlanta, Miami, the other side of the bracket, Miami's not going to deviate from who they are, and they're going to play their game. So that'd be an interesting matchup with a Red Bull team. Atlanta and Red Bull, as we saw at Red Bull Arena not that long ago, that was a very interesting matchup and a really fascinating tactical battle. And if you add Forsberg into that matchup, which he wasn't there that time, I think Red Bull can beat Orlando. I think Red Bull can beat Charlotte, although Charlotte is a really interesting matchup for Red Bull because Orlando's going to want the ball. Orlando's going to play, and I think Red Bull could negate that. Charlotte is a defensive team. So Charlotte's gonna play long. They're gonna let Ajimon go fight everybody up top. They're not gonna try to build up a lot of the play. The press won't be as effective against them. So it could be a little bit of a 50-50 game if that was the matchup. So I don't know. The Eastern Conference is fascinating to me. I've said it's far better than the West all season long. I really, truly believe it. And I think this series shows you that with as good as Columbus is, they weren't good enough, not by a wide margin, by one goal in one game and by a penalty shootout.
Yep.
But that's the margins when you get to the postseason.
Yeah.
And that's parity. I mean,
that's
how it is,
absolutely.
So then really quick, just on that series, one more. What is at this point, and I'm not saying that the legacy is over, but 2023 all the way through MLS Cup and then now to the end of 2024 for Columbus Crew, what would you consider their legacy at this point?
I think a model that can win in this league. We've seen a lot of teams go to less possession in 2024, and I think Columbus has shown you that, no, you can play in this way and be very effective. They've also shown you can do it without household legendary names. Cucho, great player. Don't get me wrong. Diego Rossi adding him, great player. But we're not talking Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi. We're talking about guys who are a few tiers underneath that. But then they've also taken guys like Sean Zawadzki, who's one of the most underrated players in the league, Malte Amundsen, Max Arston, guys who have been really, really good for that team. Steven Moreira,
when he was here.
Yeah, you can go through all of them. They've taken guys and developed them. I think Wilfred Nancy, the coaching job he has done, has been as good as anybody in the league over a 2-year period.
Agreed.
This should be one of the teams that we hold up and we cherish, and we want more teams in the league to be brave enough to play that way. that should be something that we want to see. It should not be what I've seen way too much of yesterday and today, of kicking them while they're down and saying that, oh, well, they weren't that good to begin with. That's a lie. And that's being a prisoner of the moment and trying to get clicks.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you. So book is closed on the 2024 season for the Crew, but Red Bulls, as we said, either NYC or Cincinnati in the Eastern Conference semifinals. So going over to the West, Seattle sweeping Houston, both of those matches going to penalties. And I personally thought that would go all three games. I thought Seattle would come out of that, but Seattle ultimately winning both matches in penalties. Houston really were at a disadvantage for game 2. Garcia got the red card game 1. Herrera kind of a rush of blood, spitting at the referee, getting sent off, which really stupid from a veteran player.
Really stupid.
Yeah. But ultimately that goes to penalties. Seattle wins again. And now we have a possible Cascadia Derby situation if Vancouver can somehow beat LAFC, or we can get Seattle LAFC, which would be a pretty intriguing matchup.
Mm-hmm.
How Seattle's defense has carried them a long way this season going into the postseason. How long can it carry them in this postseason?
You're getting into single game knockouts now, and that's where defense becomes more important. So, I think either team that won in that one, Seattle or Houston, had limitations. I think that the Galaxy and LAFC are better teams. Vancouver taking LAFC to a third game is great. LAFC has to get it together and get past that third game. They're going to have to make some hard decisions, and said it when they signed Olivier Giroud. He didn't necessarily make them better, and he honestly in some ways makes them more complicated in terms of lineup selection. What they were doing with Mateusz Bogusz was better as the false nine, what have you, and you add Giroud and you add Vela back into the group, and you've made it a little more difficult to figure out who you are, and I thought that showed against Vancouver in second game. And honestly against the first game too. Yeah, a little bit. And it's just you have like mismatched parts too. Like, this is a team that is very talented, but you can have very talented groups that don't necessarily fit together. And LAFC's got to find that fit that they had in the first half of the year. I think the Galaxy are a better team. I think the Galaxy come out of the West. If it's Seattle and LAFC, Seattle can really frustrate LAFC. In a single game, even in Los Angeles, I don't think LAFC has a massive advantage there. The Houston series was weird. I've been a big fan of what Ben Olsen has done with the Houston Dynamo. I think that there's a bunch of teams in the West with managers that maybe aren't popular with I don't know if we're talking the media or even some fan bases, but what Ben Olsen's done in Houston has been impressive. He's got an Open Cup to his credit. What Phil Neville did with Portland this year, outside of getting blown out in the playoff game, which sounds like there's bigger issues than him.
Really inopportune quotes about God.
Probably should have watched out for that one, especially when you're dealing with Vanni Sartini, who's one of the best quote makers in the league. But also it sounds like there were more issues with Portland behind the scenes that are outside of Neville's control. But I think what he did with them this year was good. I think what Pablo Mastroeni's done with RSL over the past couple of years has been very good. What Armas did with Colorado this year, even though they got blown out by the best team in the West, in my opinion, in the Galaxy, very, very good. These are all like managers who've been around the league, who've done different things, who aren't the sexy pick to talk about, but I think they're all very good managers, and they have teams playing in, kind of their image in a way. Houston, unfortunately, the image of Olsen that we know as a player where he was scrappy and a fighter came out too much in Carrasquilla and getting a red, which was the right call. I think it was on the softer side, but you can justify that red. I think you probably could have gotten away with yellows all around in that situation, but you go hand to the face, you're probably going to get a red in those moments. So Carrasquilla getting it, totally understand. Herrera, no question, that was incredibly stupid. He needs to be suspended for a long period of next season because of that, because that's as disgusting as it gets. Yeah, he didn't spit in his face, but he spit at him. We know that he did. He can't lie and say that he didn't.
Disrespectful.
It's the most disrespectful. It's horrible. So Houston couldn't manage their emotions in those moments. Seattle could. Seattle can beat LAFC. Seattle Vancouver would be really, really interesting. I'd like to see it. LA Galaxy on the other side, I think, is the team to beat in the West, though. I think they're the most complete. Gabriel Peck winning newcomer of the year, such a good player.
Yep.
I think people here in Atlanta, we got maybe some negative impressions of Pedro Amador in his first MLS game at LA, and it's like, oh, he's going to struggle defensively in this league. He's going up against Gabriel Peck. Like
Right.
a lot of people struggled against Gabriel Peck.
Right.
I think we've seen Amador come pretty good after that.
Yeah.
And he also got thrown into that one shortly after he got here. So,
yeah. I mean, look, like the Galaxy, and I think in most seasons, what Ricky Pooch did with the Galaxy would be an MVP kind of year. I really think it was that good, and he has been such a transformational element for that team. So I think they're the team to beat in the West. LAFC is close. Steve Cherundolo is going to have to make some hard decisions, though, about leaving some big names out to make that team better, in my opinion.
You know, the Galaxy is, and I want to jump back to something about Houston, but the Galaxy is intriguing to me. Going back to the parity conversation from the prior series, it just shows, one off season is all it takes
to
completely transform a team in this league. And it's like that anywhere, but you make the right moves and you can go from essentially being a wooden spoon contender candidate to, in my opinion, the best team overall in the league right now.
No doubt.
Now, Columbus, obviously, notwithstanding, but they're out now, so whatever. But the Galaxy, to me, was the most well-rounded overall. They brought in the guys to do it.
Yeah, I felt like the Galaxy and Miami and Columbus are kind of the three that have separated. I had the Galaxy like a tier under, like not a whole tier, like a little bit under Columbus and Miami in terms of overall talent and being well-rounded and all those things. The Galaxy, by adding Peck and Paintsil, became so much more explosive than they had been previously. And it's kind of like Spain, where, their wingers came good. Lamine Yamal coming into the national team, for example. When you look at Spain in the 22 World Cup versus Spain in the 24 Euro, it was the wingers that made the difference. It was having that ability out wide with Williams and with Lamine Yamal to change a game in the 1v1s that made that team look right, made it look more complete. The Galaxy adding Paintsil and Peck made them look so much more dangerous all over the field. So, like, it is one offseason can transform it, but how you use that offseason is the most important thing, and what positions can make the biggest impact. And they're different in different teams and different setups. But if you get the right, especially in this league, the right attacking piece that is great in your 1v1s and can do things individually, but can make other players around them better, either because they combine better or they just open up more space for others, that kind of player will have more impact in this league than any other. And typically they're going to be wingers or nines. That's just the way that this league is kind of set up, because you're going to be going up against guys that are not quite at the same level as you. When you talk about spending, teams generally aren't going to spend the same on wing as they do at fullback. So you're going to be going up against, and you don't define guys purely by salary and acquisition cost, but if you're spending $10 million on a winger against a fullback that you spent $1 million on, you're probably going to expect a $10 million guy to do more, right?
Right.
So, like that, if you get that position right, I feel like that's where you can have the most impact.
Yeah. And definitely fair play to Peck. I voted for him as newcomer of the year. I know people are kind of scoffing, saying that Suarez should have gotten it. And Suarez, of course, got his share of votes.
Yeah, it's a toss-up.
Yeah. But looking at LA, they absolutely, you can see the difference in that team from last year versus this year. And that's a terrific job by their front office to bring in Peck, bring in Paintsil, bring in those attacking pieces to really elevate this team. And Colorado, as good as they did in the regular season, did as they had a chance against them.
They're not at the same level.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But now Minnesota comes in. You have LA hosting Minnesota in the conference semifinals. Minnesota getting past RSL. Not the sexiest series, but Minnesota winning both. Yeah.
It was not.
Yeah. Right. No, absolutely. And that one went to penalties in both matches, of course. how does Minnesota mitigate? How's their defense stack up to LA? They're going to need to be obviously at their best to beat LA, I think. How do they stack up? How can they exploit LA's weaknesses and maybe pull off a shot to get to the conference finals?
What is Dane St. Clair's lucky pregame meal? Because he better eat it between now and that game every day. Like, that's what it's going to take. I mean, it's going to take a goalkeeper. And look, we've seen it in knockout games many times. You know, your goalkeeper standing on his head, team not quite firing on all cylinders and pulling the upset. I mean, that's what it's going to take for Minnesota. I don't think they are at the same level to play on an even playing field with the Galaxy. I think they're going to need to get a little fortunate. They're going to need especially St. Clair to be brilliant, and they're going to have to hope for a little bit of a bad day from the Galaxy's multitude of attackers. I just don't think they're at a high enough level to really, truly compete in that. And I don't think they were great against RSL. RSL made a tough decision in midseason, and I get why they did it. Andres Gomez, a player that didn't get enough acclaim in this league. It was too good of a deal to say no to. They didn't, but they weren't able to truly replace him, and their offense was not the same after. Their team was not the same after. When we saw them in the summer out there, that was a team that was right underneath the best of the West. They were a good, solid third in the West. They weren't that by the end of the season. So it's a shame for them. It's a shame for Mastroeni. Minnesota did enough to get through, but I just don't see how Minnesota gets through the Galaxy in the next round.
So, and that's the thing, like some of these games, the Seattle series, the Minnesota series, it was rough watches. It really was. They were not.
At least Seattle, Houston, you had some red cards and you had some histrionics and things.
Yeah. At least you had a little bit of entertainment, a little bit.
Yeah, I'll take that. You know, I want that at least. Yeah. If I'm not going to get good play, at least entertain me.
Right.
Especially in the Western Conference, like y'all do all the crap you want to do. Like have fun.
Come on.
So before we jump back over to kind of all the teams that forced game 3, I feel like every time you're on the show, I ask you to put on a different hat. I think last time it was Lagerway's hat. I ask you to put on Ben Olsen's hat going back to Houston.
Yeah.
And the fun times that at least we got to see out of that. From a coaching perspective, how do you handle what Hector did? I mean, Coco's one thing. How do you handle, because MLS is going to go, they're going to do the thing as they should. It should be a severe punishment, but for the coach still has to do something. How do you handle this now that you're at the end of the season?
It's tough. If it was midseason, you'd handle it differently. Being at the end of the season, I think honestly, if you're dealing with a younger player, you handle it differently too. I think with Herrera and who he is and what he's done, he knows he screwed up. He knows he lost his head. He knows he made a big mistake. You don't have to remind him of that. With the way the season now it's done, you probably don't deal with it too much, honestly. Guys go their separate ways. And then when you come back into preseason, you probably have that conversation about, you let us down. You let us down in a big way. You know that, right? And he apologizes, as he will. I mean, again, he's a veteran of the game. You know, this isn't completely of his character from what we've seen from him in this league. So I think it is just one of those things that is a big mistake. You remind him to start next year of that big mistake, and however many games he's going to get suspended, which my guess would be a minimum of 3. I don't know what the precedents are. I'd have to go back and look, but
I mean, Almada got 3 for bumping into a ref.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it could be 3 to 5 and whatever. I mean, if they say 10, I'm not going to argue it. I'm not going to say anything about it. It is what it is. And you just accept it and you just move on. Because I don't think it's something that will be repeated. I think it's just a really stupid reaction in the moment that ended up costing the team. And he's not a player that you have to try to correct bad behavior on. You have that conversation. My assumption would be that Herrera probably apologized to the locker room last night.
Yeah.
If he needs to do it again the start of preseason next year, then he does. But you move on with him as opposed to like banishing him or castigating him or any of that.
Yeah. He's a veteran player, like we said.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that definitely plays into it. Definitely. So I don't know, sorry if you had anything else on that.
That's the West to me. I think the Galaxy get through it in the long run, but
Yeah.
Game 3 with LAFC Vancouver, I'll be really intrigued to see what LAFC starts in that lineup.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, definitely will be.
Side note, and you've already touched on it, but Giroud is not the right guy.
Non-factor.
Not the right guy for that team.
Nope.
And that's where you get the kind of LAFC, the Miami, to a degree, New York, if they didn't play on a baseball field. You've got the draw.
Yep.
And I think LA is starting to see like maybe so much of a draw and no strategy isn't quite the best route to go.
I agree.
It sucks for them, but I'm happy to see it because I want to see LA Galaxy make it out. That's the one I want to see.
I think they will.
I enjoy their football a whole lot more than what LAFC has evolved into. And look, that's one reason why I'm probably a little saltier towards LAFC. Bob Bradley, when he came in, I think he came in with a chip on his shoulder after the failure he had in the Premier League and all the talk about that failure. He came in and said, I'm going to be wide open. I'm going to attack. We're going to score a ton of goals and it's going to be effective. And maybe he had too much of that chip on his shoulder and maybe he needed a little more balance and things like that. And that's definitely a debate. I thought the way Seattle knocked them out in 2019 said a lot about Bradley being too stubborn and Seattle being more physical and beating them up in certain parts of the field. Well, Bradley moved on and Steve Cherundolo has turned LAFC into something completely different. I think in general, LAFC is now a counterattacking team, a team that will sit back deep and play in a lower block and not be as wide open and entertaining. And at times has been extremely cynical. And Cherundolo has a bad habit of blaming everything and everybody around him at times. I remember the CONCACAF run, just constant complaints, and it wears thin. And I think this team in that market, and I think this is something that probably will come around to the Atlanta conversation. When you are a big team in a big market, of course you have to win. But I do think there is an expectation to do more than just win. And I think when you don't, you better win, because if you play boring soccer or more defensive soccer, negative, whatever term you want to put to it, but not the soccer of a front running team. If you play the soccer of a team that has lower budgets and has to be more defensive with less talent and all those kinds of things, if you do that and you win, people will grin and bear it. Yeah. If you do that and you don't win, you're not going to last. It's not going to be successful. So LAFC, I don't like what Cherundolo has turned them into in terms of being more of a negative team. And I think he's going to have to find a way to win because he's gotten close a lot. He's going to have to find a way to win MLS Cup now again and do it in a way that is that style that I think his fans want. Yeah. Like they beat Philly and look, they were seconds away from losing in that final. Yeah. Gareth Bale, who didn't do a whole lot else, bailed them out in that moment, literally and figuratively, and all the puns intended. Yeah. He did the job in that moment, but they were seconds away from failing in their own building in MLS Cup final. And they win, and like I don't want to say it feels like they didn't win, but they won, and it's not like a hugely memorable, like this team was dominant. This was the best team ever.
Right.
I think they had other teams that you have that more of a feeling about. So I think, and this is going to be really interesting if it comes down this way. If it comes down to 1 versus 2, as you should, with the Galaxy going to BMO Stadium and playing LAFC, and if the Galaxy win that game, I think there's going to be some questions, especially if he plays the way that he has been playing and with the personnel that he has been playing. Because if he does, I think the Galaxy will win. And then I think the questions will really start to get loud.
Yeah. So I guess kind of segueing to that game 3 between Vancouver and LAFC at BMO Stadium, Vancouver certainly has taken on the identity of Vinny Sartini. You mentioned him
100%.
earlier, just the best quote in MLS by far. Brian
Sometimes
White,
a dangerous one.
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
A very dangerous.
Yeah.
But yes, the best quote in the league.
No, absolutely. I don't think there'll be any comments about referees
I hope
at the
not.
bottom of the river anytime
Yeah,
soon.
let's leave that one out.
Yeah.
Please.
No,
Come on,
absolutely. Yeah. But no, they've really taken on his hype card there. They've really taken on his identity. And you talked about LAFC, kind of the style of football that they've played, sort of to their detriment at times. How does that benefit Vancouver as they come in with a chip on their shoulder, right? As they look to make it to the Western Conference semifinals against really all odds? How does that benefit them, and how can that possibly position them to pull off a shock win in LA against LAFC?
They're capable. I mean, if LAFC drops off more and gives Vancouver more of the game, Whitecaps will take that and they'll grow in confidence as it goes on. That's why, I think it goes back to the idea that if you are a big club, you have to play like a big club. And if you're a big club, you don't give the game to the opponent. Like, are there situations and moments in games where you have to do that? Of course. I'm talking about in terms of overall personality. If you are Real Madrid, you don't sit in a low block against
Right.
Levante.
Right.
You don't. And I mean, I've read the books about the whole like Guardiola and Mourinho and that era of La Liga and that era of Barcelona and Real Madrid. And Real Madrid swallowed a poison pill in a way of signing Jose Mourinho to be their manager because he was very anti what Real Madrid had been. Real Madrid is a club of gentlemen. It's a club of like high society. It's a club of playing the game in a certain way. And you got Mourinho sticking his finger in guys' eyes. That's so against what they would do, and playing in a low block and playing 3 defensive midfielders, a triple pivot, and like all these things.
Yeah,
it made it entertaining in a not high quality way. It made it entertaining in like a Jerry Springer way, which look, it's still entertaining, but it's a little more disposable. It's just you need to, when you are an LAFC, you need to play like a front running team. And I think in this game specifically, if you don't, Vancouver's the team with the personality of nothing to lose, and they will come in and just take that from you. You can't let Ryan Gauld get going, and if you drop off too much, you will. If you purely try to play in the counter, Denny Boanga can do it, and he's that good in those moments, and Mateusz Bogusz is good in those moments, but I think you leave the door open to get upset. But that's what Cherundolo has done with that team. That's what he's kind of turned them into, and it's worked to a pretty good degree. I can't lie, but I think it just opens too many doors for potentially getting knocked off. I do think they'll get past Vancouver, but if they take that approach against the LA Galaxy, I don't think they win that game even at home.
Yeah. All right. So jumping back over, we have Charlotte, New York City. Well, we just talked about Vancouver, and Atlanta, all force game 3. Let's just go into Atlanta. Let's just, before we do anything else.
Do it. Let's go.
What were your emotions, I guess, your thoughts at the end of that match?
Trying to remember what they were, because I think I might have blacked out. I mean, you guys have seen the video by now of the booth cam. It was funny looking back at it though, that I was getting up before Shande shot it.
Yeah.
I saw it building and was like, "Oh, this is gonna be it." It was wild. I mean, the two games against Miami, I'll share this with you guys. in my production call, and Mike and I's production call with Rob last week, as we were finishing it up, I told him that the game in Fort Lauderdale was, outside of MLS Cup, the game that I would remember how it felt to call it and how I felt calling it. You know, maybe the Open Cup finals close to that, like, but you know, for example, like the Red Bulls first game in the Eastern Conference Final in 2018, like I watched the highlights back and I remember the game. But I don't remember how I felt calling it. I hope I always remember how I felt calling that game in Fort Lauderdale. I said it was inspiring on the call at the end.
Mhm.
It was just an incredible performance. And I told Rob that, and Rob was like, "Really?" Like he was like, "Really? Wow." And he said that it gave him goosebumps to hear that, because obviously he was really proud of his group and proud of the way that they played. And you guys have no idea how tired that team was going into that game.
Yeah.
And this is not a team that will make excuses or any of that, but they had a million excuses going into that game. And then they got another one. Brooks Lennon got injured. They had another one when Sion Gregerson got injured. They had two more when they had to make halftime subs. They got another one when Ronald Hernandez was ill and couldn't play, like all these different things. And they took that game to the wire. So going into this one, like I was really proud of what the team had done over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And it's not that I mean, I've said it all along about Miami, like they're beatable because they're not a good defensive team.
Yep.
And Atlanta's handled that pretty well this season. So I wasn't ever like, it's no chance. But you know, when you get your backs against the wall against a team like that can put you out with a couple of good goals, then yeah, you start to think like this is going to be really hard. That first goal is such a weird fluky thing, and we can debate impeding
Right.
the goalkeeper and the laws of the game. That gets called half the time, you know. He definitely makes a movement towards Gazan, and it affects Gazan. He doesn't touch him. I said in the moment, and I still believe it. Like if Brad just goes in his normal motion to punt that and collides with him, it gets called.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Brad tries to avoid it, and he drops the ball, and they don't call the foul, which again they call maybe half the time in terms of like not letting the goalkeeper do what he's doing. So crazy fluky goal. Miami seemed really flat without energy. And the other thing about this group is when they get into the moments like they were from the start of the second half, they don't defend a lead well. They
Mhm.
add to leads well. They don't defend leads well. They're not a strong defensive team. They're just not. And they weren't in this case. And when they pulled Yannick Bright, that made them even worse defensively. And I thought you saw them struggle a lot on just defending Atlanta going forward. You know, I talked about Noah Allen being in the middle of the three center backs, still a crazy move to me. I don't think Atlanta did enough to exploit that. They should have done more. But this, you know, as the game went on, when Derek scored and it got it to 1-1, I'm like, okay, this is a total toss up and anything
Yeah.
can happen the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And then as that second half went on, I'm like, Miami's going to score. They're pinning Atlanta in. They're getting those moments. Messi's starting to really get active. Like they're gonna find a goal here late, and that's going to be it. Shonday coming in was a really bold move
Yep.
Mhm.
because it was an attacking move at that moment, where you weren't really attacking a whole lot. Like you were getting pinned in, and it was a bold move, and obviously it's the right move. But it was just such a crazy moment. I think for me, in a moment like that, the way that game went, I was just so focused on trying to explain what happened, knowing there's still about 2 minutes to play.
Yeah.
And Miami's fully capable of going down and getting a goal in those 2 minutes. You know, we saw it at Red Bull, what
Yep.
happened in that game. So it's like, I'm so focused on all of that. It's so loud and it's so crazy. And it's just such a great moment for Shonday, who's been very inconsistent this year, and he's battled injuries, and he hasn't been able to do what we all expected him to do this season. So I was really happy for him in the moment. I love the ball from Miranchuk, and I was going nuts about that. Rios battling in the moment and keeping the play alive, like all of those things. I was trying to capture all of that, but then also keep my head and keep my focus about now you have to defend this thing for a couple more minutes and not do what so many teams do in that moment, lose your mind because you just scored a great goal and then give one up.
Yep.
So it was a lot of trying to stay in the moment and not go completely crazy. I went a little crazy, but not completely crazy.
Right.
Trying to find that balance.
We all did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, that's a credit to the team, though. And Rob mentioned it in the post game. He was excited, but he had to keep his composure because there's still 90 seconds, 2 minutes left. But that's a real credit to the team for them to be able to hold that lead, not concede in the final seconds, like you said, because Miami certainly has the capability to do so. But that just shows the identity that they've taken on under Rob Valentino, this chip on our shoulders, never give up mindset. And there's going to be a lot of conversations if he's the guy, if they do end up winning game 3. So I guess if they win game 3, do those conversations intensify about making him permanent head coach, or would it still be a little too early to have that conversation, or does the team, do you think, continue to open the candidacy to outside individuals? What do you think?
I think that what he's done in these 2 games against Miami and what he did in Montreal and what he did in Orlando has changed the conversation. We get to talk to Garth Lagerwey in our pregame show throughout the season, almost every game this season, and I can't remember which one it was, either Red Bulls or Montreal, those last 2 regular season home games. He talked about interviewing candidates. I think he might have said it in Orlando as well, about interviewing candidates. And, they had the international break, so they had some time in that window to do it. So, I mean, that's done. If the other candidates have interviewed, we've heard the reports on Patrick Vieira, for example. I think it's different now than it was then. I don't know if it's different enough, but it's different. It has to be, because the way that Rob and his staff, and I do think it is the entire staff, the work that they have done, the balance that they have found. I mean, there was a shot, I don't know if it was after the Shonday goal or if it was after the final whistle. I think it was after the Shonday goal. It could have been after the Derek Williams goal. Rob in the technical area, I think he hugged Liam Curran, might have hugged Matt Lowry, might have been a player there, and he turned to Carl Robinson, and it was different. And it was a hug, but it was different. I think what Carl has really brought to the group is incredibly underrated. He has been through it as a manager. He has that experience that the rest of them don't have in the same way. He is a little bit of the wiser head in some of those moments, and I think he can help ground them in some of those moments where it's, oh my God, we just did this, but we're not done yet. What do we have to do to see this thing out? I think that balance of that entire group has been a very key thing. But Derek Williams told us on the full-time report, other people referenced it as well in the locker room. To me, this team is a Rob Valentino team right now, and they are playing like you would think a Rob Valentino team would. That's a credit to him. That's a credit to his staff. And the reason why this is happening is because of that. So that has to earn consideration. Does it earn all the consideration? Look, I'm not making that call. That's not my job.
I'm not putting you back in the Garth hat again.
Don't put me in that hat right now, because that's not it. But it is, in my opinion, what has happened over these past couple of weeks has to have had an effect on what the overall conversation is. If this team goes to Fort Lauderdale and knocks out the best team in league history in their own house, it's gonna be a very loud roar of that Rob deserves more than just consideration.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is to that. Like, I really don't know. But if they win, I think it's a loud roar right now, and it should be.
Agreed.
That doesn't mean he gets the job. That means that he should be absolutely considered in a different way than maybe he should have been 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But if they go down there and beat Miami, it's going to be really hard to say no to that possibility. And look, we'll see. I mean, if he gets it, he has absolutely earned it.
Oh yeah.
There can be no question about that. If he gets the job, what he has done with this group over these past couple of weeks has absolutely earned him that job.
Yeah.
So
and now you have, I was going to say real quick, now you have 2 DPs left. Now you have the ability to give him the tools he needs to actually help this team become a force in MLS, I think.
Yeah, to do more. I mean, look, I think the word pragmatic gets thrown around as an insult in this game way too much. Like, pragmatic's not a negative word.
Man, I throw that as a positive all
Yeah,
the time.
you do.
It should be. And in soccer, too often we put that to defensive, and it's not what it means. Like, literally, just get a dictionary out, folks. Like, it is taking what you have to work with and making the best of it. And that's what he's done. Like, he doesn't have 2 designated players that you would expect would be on the attacking side. Okay, he's got to figure out a way to navigate that. He's incorporating Alexei Miranchuk, who's a very different kind of 10 than he had previously in Thiago Almada. Okay, he's navigating that. He hasn't been able to get consistent play out of the left wing because of injury, poor form, what have you. He's navigating that. He's tried a whole bunch of different things. They've played in a 3-2-3-2, 5-2-3 kind of a shape. For a while, that worked with what they had at that time. They've played a 5-3-2. They've played a 4-3-3. They've moved around in those pieces. Down in Fort Lauderdale, he had to change the shape 2 different times after the start. It's really impressive. He's been very pragmatic in all the good ways. So if he earns the job and he gets it, and you add 2 attacking pieces, and you probably change other pieces in the group too. Like, you will have a different group to work with. I think the team will look different. I think he wants to attack more, but he has to protect what he has to work with right now. So, I think what we're seeing overall in the game, and this would be a much longer conversation than we have time for, I think you have people like Patrice Evra, and others saying that what Guardiola's done is ruin the game, because if you don't have the talent that Guardiola teams do, then you can't play that way. I thoroughly disagree. I think you can be a team that wants the ball and wants to manage possession, period. That's a choice you make when you build a team. That's a choice you make when you decide how you want to play. You can also, in that, understand your limitations and your positives in that. And you have to hide your negatives in a team, and you have to accentuate your positives. Possession for some teams like Columbus might be more in the 60% range. Possession. I think Miami's number, throw that to the side, because Miami tilts the game by filling out the lineup sheet and putting Messi and Suarez and Alba and Busquets on it. Like, I think that's different. I think what Columbus has shown, like, they want the ball and they're going to play that way and they're going to keep it. But you can have, instead of 60% possession, you can have 55, and you can decide where you have some of that possession and how quickly you move that possession into the attacking half, and still have the same principles of positional play and overloading areas and having numerical advantages, because people associate Guardiola with possession. It's not really the case. Like, Guardiola's been able to fill out lineup sheets that have made teams sit back too. And he did that at Bayern. He did that at City. He did that at Barca. And teams have made that choice to defend it. So if they give you the ball, what are you supposed to do? Like, if you're built to have the ball and they give you more of it, like, okay, thank you. Like, what do you do? But at Bayern, they were different than they were at Barcelona, and they're different at City than they were at the other two. And at City, we've seen them be different in different eras of Manchester City. It's not about possession. And I think when we talk about possession, that's just a number. It doesn't define a style. The stylistic element of it, to me, and I think Rob subscribes to this, even though he's had less possession than the team had previously, because I think he's had less to work with on the ball, but also because what he has done has accentuated getting the team quicker into the attacking half and getting them into numerical or qualitative advantages when they get there. Because positional play, the idea of the Dutch, of Cruyff, of Guardiola, of others, and Bielsa subscribes to it, but he interprets it differently.
Ted Lasso too.
Well, I'm sure he interprets it very, very differently.
Rediscovered it.
Yeah, that's a whole nother element. But positional play, like, yeah, you want numerical advantages where you can, because 2 versus 1 is a lot better than 1 versus 1. But if your 1 versus 1 is a really good matchup for you, 1 versus 1, you want the 1v1. So it's about finding advantages on the field, straight up.
Yeah.
And if your advantage, and right now Atlanta's advantage in a lot of ways is getting Pedro Amador into the attacking third to deliver crosses from the left side, getting Sabo Lobjanidze running in behind and getting into 1v1 situations. If that's what you've identified as, like, man, these are the 2 things that we can win games with, okay, you got to accentuate that. And however you get there doesn't mean you hate the ball. It doesn't mean you're defensive. It doesn't mean anything like that. It's playing to your strengths. And I think what Rob's been able to do is do that. And it's worked. It's worked as well as it possibly could with the group that he has now. That doesn't mean they look the same in 2025 if he is in charge and they have new pieces.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one other aspect of it is here in the past 2 weeks, because we've seen Rob kind of evolve in a way over the past really decision day going to now.
How would you say?
I think we always see the way that he tries to push the mentality, right? We see the kind of motivational factor. Well, down in Orlando, right, we asked a couple of people. We asked Derek, and I think we asked Saba in the locker room, and both of them made it a point to say, like, the speech that he gave, you know, the kind of motivational factors behind him, like, it made them want to come out and essentially run through a wall, which is great. But you've been so up and down before that. It was like, well, can you carry it over? Then you go to Montreal and you squeak out one and you just wanted it more. Motivation. Then you go to Miami, and though you lost, we saw how tired they were, right? We saw Brad, we saw Pedro, and we saw Rob. Rob was exhausted as well. But, you know, he had nothing but pride for his team. And he was like a dad, right? Looking at his kids that just did something amazing. Even though they didn't quite, you know, cross the finish line, like, you had a successful, I think, view of what your team could do. And then you come back here to Atlanta. We've kind of heard and seen some of the motivational factors here, the fans, and then he goes out and gets the reward in dramatic fashion, but gets the reward to now go back down and really try to continue to prove everybody wrong, because the regular season was a crap sandwich in terms of what he was handed, right? The timing of the transfers, everything else. You can't go in and make wholesale changes to your tactics in the middle of the season or later.
No.
And he's figured out a way to make it work with what he's got. And to me, that is the definition of pragmatism.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes back to, I think, him being a good motivator.
Yeah, he connects well with players, and that's something that he's done in all of his previous roles with the club. He's always been really good at connecting and getting the best out of players, and it's always hard when you are, you know, and I don't think it was a good cop to bad cop with being the assistant to Pineda, you know, or previous staffs he'd been in. It's not always purely good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
It's just, you're different. You have a different relationship. You have a different role. Like, you know, the player might come to you because he's upset with the coach. He might come to you because he's upset he's not playing enough, or he's not playing in the role that he wants, or whatever. And you have to be that person. But then when you are the person that's going to piss players off, like, that can be difficult. That can be an adjustment. I think Rob has handled all that incredibly well this season.
Yeah.
I think he's found the right buttons to push. I think, you know, as Derek said, I think this team is a reflection of him right now.
Yep.
And, you know, it's fun because we go back to big club expectations. Atlanta United won't often be an underdog. They shouldn't be. That's not what the club aspires to be. It's not where they should be. It's not really where they've been very often, right now they're absolutely an underdog.
Yeah.
And they are on paper. They are on paper against Miami, which is not a place they typically are. They are in terms of the overall record. They are in everything going into this game, and that's really how it's been these last couple of weeks. They've embraced that attitude and embraced that mantra, and they are doing the job with it. It's been really cool to see. It's been a fun ride. Got at least one more, and I'm not putting anything past this group in Fort Lauderdale because this is not a normal top seed favorite situation.
Yeah.
Miami is not what a lot of best teams in a league are. Typically, those teams are at least very good, a 7.5 out of 10 defensively. This Miami team is very average defensively, maybe below average. That's going to give you an opportunity in this game, period. Now, you might score 2 to their 6, but they're going to give you opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net. You have to defend that star-studded attack, just like you have in these last 2 games. You've done a really good job defensively against Miami. They're going to have to find some different things because you took away their bread and butter in game 2. You didn't let them have that area at the top of the 18. They could not find it, and you defended those areas very, very well. They're going to have to figure something out in game 3. You also have to take advantage of your opportunities because they're going to be given to you.
Yeah.
And, because of that, this feels very different than a typical 1-9 winner-take-all match in the number 1 team's building, just because they're not good enough defensively to make it easy for themselves. They're good enough offensively to do that, and this is what's so different. Usually it's like the 4 or the 5 seed that is that high because they can score a ton of goals and they give up a bunch. Miami is like exaggerated in that. They can score more goals than anybody you've ever seen, but they can also give up 2 or 3.
Yep.
So if they don't score 4 or 5, then it's a shootout kind of game. And I think Atlanta can handle that.
Well, yeah, and I think what's really interesting as well to that same point is in this series, you've given up 2 mistakey, fluky goals and 1 golazo.
You haven't been being clean, really.
No,
all this goal.
And you haven't given up even Brad was great in game 1. I mean, he made some great plays, great saves, but go back and look at the XG in that. Like, it's not completely absurd, it's not like you were dead tired in that game and you were able to hang like that. Game 2, you were the better team.
Yeah.
You were the better team and you got the win that your play deserved. Game 3, going back down there, you're going to be rested, so you're not going to be at full strength because you're not going to have Brooks Lennon. I don't imagine you're going to have Stian Gregerson, but maybe. But if both teams roll in the way that they started this one, they should get Busquets back, you would expect.
I don't know, with that pneumania, if it was possible pneumonia.
If it was to that degree, then maybe that's a little more complicated than just a normal illness. But yeah, I really think this could be a legendary kind of night in MLS history. Even if Miami ends up winning it, I just think it's going to be a spectacle. And the game down there in game 1 where Atlanta was fighting at about 50% was great.
Okay.
I think this can surpass that because the teams will be much more evenly rested and matched.
So I guess real quick, because the place will be packed out, at least we hope it will. The world will be watching. Messi, of course. Atlanta will be considered the underdog. Not that they have this series at all, but how can they, for this one final match to move on to the next round, how can they keep their nerve and keep the moment from getting too big? And that, hey, we have the opportunity to pull off a legendary upset. Can they keep that from being the prevailing notion? And how can they shift their mindset to, okay, this is a business trip. We have to do what we did in game 1, game 2, certainly to the much greater extent. We have to, just play our game, make Miami play our style of football, and move on to the next round. How do they adapt that mindset?
Listen to their manager and listen to their captain. Because Rob Valentino and Brad Kazan aren't going to let them get out of the mindset they need to be in.
Yeah.
You know, it's the way this team has been for a little while now. I mean, even you go back to the Red Bulls draw on the road, the Philly draw on the road, the win in Charlotte, you go back to those kinds of games, and this team has had a different mindset, and they've handled it really well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that changes. I think it's just going to come down to, can you be good enough against the best team in league history? We've seen that they can be, but can you do it again? I don't know really what Miami can do differently outside of just be better at what they do, and that can absolutely be enough. You know, when you're talking about Lionel Messi being one of the all-time greatest to ever play the game, if he has a blinder, you're probably not going to win. Like, that's just how it is. But, you know, he's human. Suarez can score a great goal and kill you. We saw Jordi Alba do it in game 1. Like, they have plenty of guys. Like, for me, if you want to get into the mindset thing, I'm not worried about. You want to get into the tactics, I think outside of with all the talent that Miami has, Jordi Alba is the one that can tilt the game against you both ways.
Yep.
Like, he can kill you because he's so good coming from that position that you can't really match it. I thought in game 2, Saba playing as a wing back in the 5 kind of negated it to a degree, but it kind of took Saba out of having his impact in the game too, which when Miami loses Alba's impact but has Messi and Suarez's impact, well, they'll take that trade. Because if you take Saba out, he's been the best player for this team over the past few weeks.
Yep.
So if he's not able to be as effective, that's a problem. So I think if you get into tactics, like, how can you find a way to make Saba hurt Jordi Alba without taking away his ability to hurt Miami on the whole to help Atlanta's attack? You don't change anything about the way you've defended in terms of taking away that middle of the field. You make Miami hurt you from wide positions. You make them get around you. You make them go into different areas that they don't want to. You don't let Messi play 1-2s and get into the top of the arc. You don't let Suarez operate there and play those 1-2s. You have to do those things right. But for me, the game comes down to, and I've said it in both games, I feel like it's the same in game 3, that side of the field, the right side for Atlanta, the left side for Miami, whoever wins that side of the field will win the game. If it's a draw, like I think it was in game 2 on that side of the field, I thought Alba was hurt, Saba was hurt in that. So I thought it kind of ended up being 50-50 there.
Yeah.
Then you've got to find another area where you can find that advantage. And it's honestly probably the left with Pedro Amador. So, like, that's what the game comes down to for me for Atlanta. You got to make Miami play wide because they're not as effective in those spaces. And you have to play wide and win your battles in those areas of the field, because I think that's where you can beat Miami.
So, Tommy said he'll shave his beard if Atlanta advances.
Sharpen the razor, man.
Get ready.
Sharpen the razor.
I want you to do it with a straight razor. That's
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, old school Barbasol. Come
right
on.
there. You go.
Yep.
There you go.
I think I would be shocked if Tata Martino doesn't change something up to help out with Pedro Amador, because not just in the Miami series, like, he's been phenomenal. And
I don't know what he can do.
I mean, I don't either, unless you start, you kind of bring guys, out to just not give them as much space. But if you do that, then that's where you have to get what everybody has been, I guess, expecting out of your new number 10 in Miranchuk, because it's going to open up a little bit more space. We've already seen that he doesn't need a ton of space to operate. He's not Almada, like you said before. He's a different guy.
Yeah, he's
but
different.
he, like, Atlanta right now is built to play out wide. That's just what they are. Saba is that guy that is going to get in behind. Pedro has shown you cannot let him set up and tee up a shot or a cross. I think if they make any adjustment to help kind of negate Pedro, it's going to give Miranchuk just maybe that extra foot of space that he needs to really impact the game. That's what I want to see.
If you pull that player to try to deal with Amador more out of the middle, like, Weigand is what he is. He's a good player. I don't think he's necessarily better than Amador, and he's definitely a step down from Alba on the opposite side. You don't have a better one to replace him with. So you are what you are there. You are what you are defensively as well, because, and I thought it really showed in the second half of the game on Saturday night. Messi and Suarez are not good defensive players high up the field, so you're going to be able to get forward. And I feel like when we talk, and we were into the possession and identity weeds and all of that earlier, but one key element of possession that does not get talked about enough, and I hate that there is a website, or not, it's not a website, it's a Twitter account, and just a saying of when playing out of the back goes wrong. Like, because then some people will take that as to say, oh, if you play out of the back, you're stupid. It's wrong. Why would you even risk it? Then you start sounding like Jose Mourinho at this point, when you don't want the ball because you're afraid you'll make a mistake, and you play from a position of fear. When you build out of the back well, you set your team up to attack well, like flat out. It ain't rocket science. If you play through whatever pressure they're giving you and you play past players. Miami has 10 players on the field, excluding the goalkeeper. Atlanta's got 10 players on the field. That's how you start. You build up the play. If Messi and Suarez don't defend, which they didn't in the entire second half, and you play past them, okay, that's 10 versus 8. Like, of course, you have to have guys who know where they are and be ready to defend them and all that. But if you advance past them and you are 10 versus 8 across the half of the field, well, you have numerical advantage, right? You should be able to find open men, right? So if they don't all of a sudden start defending, I don't know how they get to Amador more, and how they. I think with Saba, it's just a straight up Saba versus Jordi Alba. That's your matchup, which is a really wild matchup when you get into it. But I like it. Like, at a minimum, you can negate Jordi Alba, but they don't have the bodies then. So, okay, you take him out of the equation. You've already taken Messi and Suarez out of the defensive equation. That's 9 versus 7. Now, 2 of your center backs probably have to be careful about Messi and Suarez. So, okay, 7 versus 7 there. All right, fine. Then you find your other advantages. You like Amador in a 1v1 to hit across because he's been really good at it. You like Moranchuk 1v1 against anybody defensively for Miami. Okay, cool. That's 2 things you can try to play to, because you've been able to build up the play uncontested, because Messi and Suarez will not contest it. And you can then create things much more easily. If you try to build up the play and you have to keep bringing it back and keep recycling, well, you don't get into the attacking half. So your buildup wasn't effective. So you can't attack as well. Because then what you probably end up doing, if you try to build up the play, they don't let you. You keep going back. What happens? At some point, you play long. And you're in a 50-50. Then you're flipping a coin and hoping to get the ball. Like, which would you rather do? Build up the play well. And in this case, you will absolutely be able to build up the play well, because Messi and Suarez aren't going to defend. So then you're able to get into the attacking half and make things happen, and not just have to play long and hope things happen. And that's why, to me, build-up play is so critical. And when you're playing a team like Miami that gives you build-up play, you have to take advantage of it, because you're going to get those opportunities.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun night. Obviously, Friday will be the Western Conference, but then you have the 3 Eastern Conference games going on in succession on Saturday, and Miami and Atlanta will be that kind of nice bow on the first round. So should be a really fun weekend of playoff soccer. Of course, there's I will say Columbus, Charlotte. They won a penalties to force game 3 against Orlando, and then we already mentioned NYCFC going away to Cincinnati to close out that series. Maybe starting with Charlotte and just what they've been able to do to beat Orlando at Bank of America Stadium to force that series to game 3. I always call them kind of the good vibes team of the Eastern Conference. Do those vibes kind of run out against Orlando on Saturday, or does Charlotte find a way to defeat Orlando and move on to possibly, or not possibly, but move on to the winner of this Atlanta-Miami series?
Charlotte's fully capable of going to Orlando and winning, but they're going to have to be braver than they were in game 1. And that's the question, is I don't know if they can be, or if they will be, maybe is the better way to put it. Orlando defensively is not all that great. And I thought the game plan that Atlanta had going down there to start and getting in behind those two center backs was brilliant. And I think Charlotte can absolutely do that because Patrick Agyemang can get in behind Robin Janssen and Rodrigo Schlegel all day, every day. But you have to be brave and play that ball, and you have to be brave and get numbers forward, and you have to be brave and try to play in the attacking half more. And Charlotte hasn't really shown that this season. They'll get Pep Biel back. I thought his red card was harsh. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I don't think he was kicking out at Janssen. I think he was putting his leg up to protect himself as much as anything. And even when you look at it in slow motion, like looked like maybe he's got his cleat stuck on Janssen's shoelace or something. Like the way his foot was moving, like was weird. But I don't think he kicked out at all. I don't think there was enough force in it. But the motion can get a red card. You can justify the red card even if you don't like the red card. I don't like the red card. He's back. That makes them better in the attacking half. But he was there in game one, and they weren't brave. They have to be brave because this is a game that they can go win, not a game where they have to just hold on and hope for penalties. And I hope that they do that because Orlando is a different version of Miami in that their defense is their issue and their defense will hurt them at some point. But for Orlando, it's the back line itself. Miami has other structural defensive issues, but the back line for Orlando is average to old to slow. Like you can play through that. You can beat that. I mean, Janssen's been there forever. Schlegel was a backup to Antonio Carlos before Antonio Carlos left, and he's not better. So, like, that is what it is. Rafael Santos is fine. Kyle Smith is fine. Like, they're not bad players, but that's not an elite level defense. And Charlotte should be able to attack that. I hope that they do because I think they can beat Orlando in Orlando if they play a more brave offensive approach.
Yeah, of course, they have Kalina in that, who got my vote for goalkeeper of the year, so he could be a big factor in that one as well.
I think a lot of people, and I agree with you, Kalina was brilliant all season long. But if you want to compare what Brad Kazan did this season, and you want to compare what Christian Kalina and some others did this season, it's not much of a difference. It's not much of a difference. Brad had an amazing year and got better as the year went on. Kalina is capable of those same things, and he has shown that over his time in Charlotte. So has Pedro Gallese, by the way, on the Orlando side. So, like, I don't think he's quite the same as he used to be.
Right.
But he's still a guy that can stand on his head and knock you out of a knockout game.
So be obnoxious.
Yep.
Obnoxious.
That too. Well, I think everybody. I think it's just something about that purple and the lion on the crest and all of it that breeds the obnoxiousness from Orlando. But I really like Oscar Pareja as a manager. I think this is one of those years where they're definitively underneath the top three in the East in terms of quality, in terms of performances. Maybe they shouldn't be at this stage. And I might not be on him. Like, I don't think he's got a good enough defense to be a whole lot better. But at some point, you got to win a little bit more, too. And they just haven't. And what if they get knocked out here, what is the conversation after? What does that look like? If they advance here and then they get, I mean, either one is pretty wild for Orlando, right? If they advance and they play Miami or they play Atlanta.
Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting for them on either front. So I don't know. I've thought Orlando would take a bigger step forward, and I just really feel like they did take a step forward into being a credible Eastern Conference upper half team. I don't think that's the ambition of that ownership. So do they have the players to get there? Do they need to get more players? Do they have the coach to get there? Do they need to get something different there? And do they know what they have and what they don't have? And do they make the right decisions? We're going to find out. But I feel like this is a little bit of I feel like it's a measuring stick for them. They should beat Charlotte. It shouldn't be at a game 3, especially with as defensive as Charlotte has been. How does Orlando handle the pressure in game 3 at home? I'll be really curious to see how that game starts.
Yeah. That's kind of the overarching theme, right? With some of these, a lot of these, Miami is under all the pressure. Orlando is under all the pressure. Cincinnati, we'll talk about here in a second, is under all the pressure. you've got a group of teams that kind of, I don't want to say like, especially not Charlotte, but you have a lot of teams that kind of are going into these games with absolutely nothing to lose. And I think it's a little bit vindicating to kind of go into the match and just let loose of all the shackles and say, hey, whatever happens, happens. Because nobody else is expecting us to win. Just putting home field advantage by itself, you're not expected to win on the road in MLS. But then when you add the playoffs into it, it changes the entire mentality.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Because the emotions change and the home field advantage isn't quite as big because it can also turn to be a negative effect when that pressure becomes the issue.
Yep.
And look, I think we've seen that with Atlanta United down the stretch at home, where they were better on the road than they were at home down the stretch, because big expectations of playing at home in front of that crowd, right? And I think some players maybe struggled with that at times, whereas on the road, you're freer. You can be the underdog, which is an easier position to be in. So I think that gets amplified in these game threes. Like, I think Orlando's going to struggle with that pressure. Miami's got guys who have been through that pressure many, many times, but it is going to be a thing. It is going to be a factor in that for sure, especially the longer it stays scoreless, the more pressure is going to mount, the more you're going to feel it in that building. Cincinnati's got to deal with pressure. And I don't know how they handle that pressure. They're the ones that I'm really curious. I don't have as good of a read on. Like, I do think if Charlotte puts Orlando under more pressure than they walk in the building with, I think Orlando could crumble. But I don't know if Charlotte does it because that hasn't been their MO all season. They've been very conservative. Cincinnati, I don't have a good read on. Not with the injuries they've had and where they've been. That's another one that, like, Cincinnati is not where they were a couple of years ago, where they were just happy to be there. Now I think there's a greater level of expectation, and this is a game that they should win. And they probably feel like they shouldn't be in a game 3. So they need to play like it. And can they? I don't know.
I think New York City takes it personally. I think Cincinnati
wins, to be honest with you.
I think Cincy will win. I think I think they'll win in regulation. I think it'll be a tough one, but I think they'll win. I do not, and maybe it's just hope with Charlotte actually coming out and playing a little bit more. I don't think Orlando wins. If they do, it's in penalties. I don't think they win in regulation. Charlotte's got to push that issue, and I think that they are capable of it.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, indeed.
Chalk it up, New York City.
Right.
Since he came out of the season with no momentum.
No
momentum. And
now look at them.
I just think New York City, you held on in that first game fairly well. I mean, it was not pretty, but you didn't get blown out. Then you go back home and you handle business. Now, of course, you've got one of the best home field advantages at MLS. But again, you have the momentum, and you had it going into this. Since he hasn't had the momentum, they've fallen off. So we'll see. But
players are a different animal, though.
I think it'll be entertaining. Yeah, exactly. I think it'll be entertaining. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. So, not that anybody needs to go and try to find you, because they already know where you're at.
Everywhere.
But I want to give you the opportunity to say, hey, SDH, Jason Longshore, where can everybody find you?
Well, I will also take the opportunity to point you to some other places too, because this week is going to be hectic. And actually, when we are done and the game is starting late, which is a good thing, turn on ESPN Plus and watch Georgia State women and Old Dominion. It's the last game of the quarterfinals in the Sun Belt. I'm just getting caught up on the Sun Belt scores from today, and they have been crazy with top seeds going down. Georgia State has won 4 straight, should have been 5 straight. The draw was against Old Dominion, where they got robbed worse than I've ever seen a team robbed by a replay. You think VAR is bad in the Premier League? Oh my God, NCAA soccer replay. You don't have a different referee doing it. Like you're using like a tablet and you're trying to blow the screen up, and they gave a penalty in the last minute of that game that I was really choosing my words carefully on the call.
Yeah.
But Georgia State's won four in a row after that. They finally got healthy. It's a really fun team. Aaliyah Fadul is one of the best female players in the Southeast. She has been in the Canadian youth national team pool in the past, and they absolutely should have her back in it right now. For best 11 in the Sun Belt, 9 goals on the season. She scored in the last 3 games for them. Yeah. Really good team, and they play really good soccer. I've been really enjoying what we've been able to do with them this season with soccer down here and covering them in depth and getting to know the personalities of that group and the amount of adversity they've dealt with. Ed Joyce talked about it on our last Panther Prowl show. He talked about FEA and what Atlanta United has embraced, and he's like, we've kind of had to deal with the same. And I talked about that with my players, and they have. They went on the road and had to win 2 games in a row on the road to get the seed that they got. They went out to Louisiana and won in 85 degrees on a Sunday afternoon. And then a few days later had to go to Conway, South Carolina and win at Coastal Carolina. And they did that too. Yeah. So they play Old Dominion. It's starting any minute now from the tournament at Foley, Alabama, last quarterfinal of the day. So watch that. That's number 1 on your assignment list. Number 2, Georgia State's men, their decision day is tomorrow night. They need to win. They need some help to get into the Sun Belt tournament. They're hosting Kentucky. You can watch it with me on ESPN Plus. I'll be on the call.
Nice.
Or you can go out to the GSU Soccer Complex in downtown Atlanta and watch it. It's a really cool spot to watch a game. Like, it is super intimate. You're right on top of the field. They call it the cage. That's what all the players call it because it feels like you're in a cage. It's almost like an extended version of that Nike commercial with the cage, the tournament. It kind of feels like that. It's amazing. So that's tomorrow night, 7:00 kick. After that game's done, when I'm calling out on ESPN Plus, I will then be heading to my home studio right here really quick to do Atlanta Soccer Tonight. That's at 10:00 tomorrow night on 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. You can get that as a download if you're not able to listen live. Obviously, we'll be covering training early tomorrow, and then on Thursday as well, we'll have clips and audio, and Madison and I will have our training ground dispatch on Tuesday and Thursday. And then Friday, we'll head to Fort Lauderdale, and Saturday with the entire SDH crew down there. We'll have plenty of content from Fort Lauderdale. I know there are a decent number of fans who are making the trip. A couple have reached out, so hopefully we'll be able to connect with them at some point beforehand, before going into the building. You can listen to the game on Star 94 on Saturday night and on the Odyssey app. And then I'll be back, and then guess what I get to do on Sunday? So I am getting back at probably 2, maybe 3 a.m.
Wow.
And then I'm waking up and I'm driving to.
I think that's lucky if you get back there.
No, I feel that's about right. I think 3 is probably the tail end of it.
Okay.
If it works out right and we get out of there and get off the ground by about midnight, 12:30, be all right. I'm not super far from the airport, so it's not too bad. But then I'll sleep for a few hours, and I'll get in the car, and I'll drive to Cullowhee, North Carolina for the SoCon Women's Championship match. Western Carolina hosting Samford. And I'll be on the call with Jessica Charman for that one. So
a slow few days for you.
No, not much. We're not going back on the roof for countdown to kickoff. I do know that much. So don't have that to add to the equation.
Right.
We are working on something kind of cool though for that. So that should drop on Saturday morning or Friday night. Typically that's how it's been going. Not doing any other games that I know of. So I think that's it.
Sounds good.
Follow me at Longshore, follow Soccer Down Here, all that stuff.
Yep.
And as always, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
We obviously love working with you guys and getting y'all's opinion and analysis and everything else. So it's been fun. I feel like there's been a lot going back and forth between these two groups.
Yep. Right.
Madison she got to learn from Tommy about what was it?
Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah, Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
That's an education for you.
Yeah,
it definitely is.
Yeah, So that if it tells you anything, those are kind of the conversations that they
Right.
often.
Well, I will end with sending you on another tangent then. From each of you, what is your Waffle House hash brown order?
Oh, okay. Here we go.
I'm
I
more
think
traditional, smothered, covered.
Smothered, covered,
Yeah.
just that. No ketchup, nothing else?
No ketchup.
Just smothered and covered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scattered, smothered, covered, and country.
Okay.
Country? What's that?
Gravy.
Wow. I don't know what to make of that.
It's make it, and it's so good. It'll change your life.
Gravy?
Gravy, yeah.
Is that on the menu now, or is that something new? Is that
I don't know. Honestly, at this point, I don't know. I don't know if it's like one of those Starbucks things.
They added a bunch of stuff. Like back in the day, it was scattered, smothered, covered, chunked, topped, and diced. But then they've added stuff past that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is officially on that list or not. This might be something you made up.
No, I promise I didn't make it up. I do it.
Okay.
However, I don't know that it is on the menu now. I don't know when I found out about it. But
okay, I will try that because
what's yours?
I'm brave. Typically I will go scattered, smothered, covered. Is that right? The onions, the cheese, the scattered, obviously.
Okay.
Ketchup typically, although sometimes mustard, really good. Sometimes
I don't know about
really
that.
good with the mustard. I was very disappointed in some of our SDH collaborators when this conversation came up and how plain they were in their choices. They're almost as plain as actually they're probably a little more plain than Sydney, just a little bit more plain.
It's not plain.
No, it's actually they're actually very comparable in plainness. You guys are all plain.
You have
plain with your Waffle House hash browns. Tyler's not plain.
No, mine's not plain. You haven't heard Tommy though. That's the problem. We had a whole thing about. I don't know if that's where the question came from.
No, this just came up in our post-game conversations on Saturday night. So
okay, so like 2 weeks ago, we had like a whole thing on the show about this exact conversation because Tommy, and I know he's listening right now.
All right, what's he do?
He doesn't have a hash brown order for Waffle House. He just says like
we'll get him on board soon.
What
we're working on it.
And he doesn't get hash browns at Waffle House?
No, he does, but he
does?
just is like, I just get
plain
hash browns, and
so
then
not even scattered.
No,
not even scattered, just as is. I guess.
How does it come then? Like
how
does it
like hashy or something? I don't freaking know.
Like what does it look like on the plate?
That's the thing. You should not be able to default order nothing but hash browns.
Tommy's from Ohio, so that's why.
That's not an excuse.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
I don't even know how they would serve that.
Right?
It's like scattered. I at least if it's scattered, I know what they popped it up. It's okay. Like he doesn't even get that.
Nope.
Is it like a brick of potato?
Basically, when they dump it on the skillet and it's just like that little circular padding.
So it is circular. It's not scattered.
It's just
it's like a hockey puck of potato.
That's exactly what it is. And that is
Tommy. The hell, man!
You know where to find them.
Not at Waffle House.
Exactly.
Come into my Waffle House order.
Exactly.
And so I'm not even adding gravy to the thing, like Tyler over here. Like I'm just like a little more than plain. I'll get mustard can get outside the box a little bit, but man,
I said the same thing. You know what's in it? This all came about right. He was here in Atlanta. What game?
Charlotte, not Charlotte, Columbus. No, not Columbus.
It doesn't matter. It was recently.
It was somewhat recently. Yeah,
it was very recently. Well, he ended up at the Waffle House right there near Centennial.
Okay, I'm afraid right now I'm getting a random call from Columbus, Ohio, and if Tommy's calling me to yell at me, like, no.
Number.
Man, the robocalls right now are out of hand. That one kind of freaks me out from Columbus.
That is
Tommy, don't call me and yell at me about Waffle House.
But I was like, cool. Like you did it right. You went to Waffle House because we were like making a bet. We're gonna do a show from a Waffle House
If Miami got the points record.
if Miami didn't get the points record.
Didn't get the points record.
So that's how it all came about. Well, he goes to Waffle House after the game, and there's a fan. He's had some things to drink. So I'm like, perfect. You should be able to remedy this entire drinking situation right now with the proper order of hash browns.
What they're there for.
Yeah, exactly. What are your hash browns? And he's like, I don't know.
We'll work on him.
I lost respect.
We'll get Tommy on board. We'll get Tommy on board
Eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
Man, we're gonna have to do something with Waffle House. All right. Anyway, you have a game, and everybody else has homework to go watch this game.
Yes, you have to watch this on ESPN Plus. Whenever this thing is gonna kick, like the game before it hasn't kicked off. The game before went to penalties. I saw so
tournament soccer.
Probably why. Yeah, that's going to be Sunbelt after dark, right? Foley, Alabama.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll throw this out there real quick. The old Waffle House menu, I'm looking at it right now, doesn't have country on it.
I think you imagined that.
They added. I remember there was a gap of time where they had the traditional ones. Like when I was in high school, it was the scattered, smothered, covered, chunked, topped, and diced,
and peppered. Is the other one.
That was later. Like that was not there back in the day because I'm old. They added peppered. They added capped. Maybe is something else they added. Like
I think it's capped. I think it's capped.
They added other stuff that I'm like, okay, we're getting way out of hand now. I'd never heard country before.
Oh, I got it right here.
Is there country?
Yep. So
it is on there now.
It is on there. Smothered, covered, chunked, diced, peppered, capped, topped, and country.
Well, you didn't imagine it.
I didn't imagine. I told you I'm not making it up.
All right.
I take my Waffle House hash browns very seriously.
I can tell. I will give that a try at some point. And Tommy's got to do better.
Yes.
Exactly. We'll pass on the message.
That is going to be an off-season conversation that continues.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Jason, we appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody listening, as our friends at Battered Heron say, free 99. All you got to do, click the like button, subscribe button, all that good stuff. Yeah. But as always, Jason, it is a pleasure, and can't wait to see what happens down in Fort Lauderdale.
It's going to be a fun one. Hopefully you can join us on the radio. We'll be yelling and screaming in wherever you are listening to us from, your car, your living room, whatever. We will be yelling and screaming along with you.
Absolutely. And stay safe, everybody.
Yeah.
And pull out all your sage, whatever you got to burn for Atlanta to win. So, we appreciate it, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. See you soon.
See you. Good stuff.
I think that's it. What happened?
Are you kidding me? Hash browns.
No, you didn't.
Hash browns.
What about hash browns?
I'm hungry.
Go get hash browns.
I can't, man. I did. So this coffee was the most substance I had today. I've been doing a detox. I've drank literally a gallon. Me and my wife both.
Yeah.
Each a gallon of like this stuff that's like grapefruit juice, lemon juice, and distilled water.
Sounds interesting.
So hash browns are hitting like real hard right now. Colonel said Tommy should be incarcerated.
Yeah.
That freaking reprobate.
I know. We love Tommy, but
we do.
Gosh, just that hash brown take it.
Gotta get his Waffle House sorted.
All right, everyone. We'll see you on Wednesday, and good night.
Happy MLS Monday. Peace.
Vote.
Yes.